Okay, let's talk about map now. Now, as you can read here, it loops over all the items of an input iterable, and it applies that function that is passed to each item of that iterable. Now, if we go back to our what was it? Our this thing here, our image here, as you can see, as we discussed also, this is mapped to this. This potato is mapped to our French fries, and this chicken is mapped to this chicken leg, and this corn is mapped to what is it? Popcorn. So each item is applied individually to our cook function. So they are not related to the previous output as in reduce. All right. So let's jump into the code now. So first, what we will do is let's create a function to find out squares of all the items in a list. This is a very common operation to figure out all the apply a function to all the functions, apply a function to all the items in a list. So let's say we have our find square. We pass a parameter here, and then we return a into a. Now this is not a very good thing to apply to write a function for this, because we already have something called, you can just find square by something like this. But again, let's just proceed here. And now we have our list that is equal to this. I'm going to type some random numbers here, and then we apply our map using, first we pass the function. What was the function? Function is find square, and then we pass the list, right? And display, just print this. Now this actually returns a map object, not a list directly. So we need to convert that map object into a list. So if we run this, type object is not iterable. So find square. Okay, my bad. This is list. It's just list, not list. This is as we define here lis. Now if we run this again, we'll see here the squares are, so we get the squares. So this is map. So what is the difference between reduce and map is map applies this all the functions, all the items to this function one by one, and it outputs it one by one. So the input of this second element is not dependent on the first element. So all these are independently applied to the list function. Whereas if we scroll back here in our reduce, it was being applied in pairs. So these two are applied, and output of these two are being used with this. So map is independent. The functions in the list are applied independent. My bad. The items in the list are independently applied to the function in map. All right. So also one powerful thing about map is we can also apply multiple parameters. As we can see here, this list find square function takes only one parameter. We can have two, three, we can have more than that number of parameters. So what we can do is here, let's say this is for multiple parameters. It's actually functions taking multiple parameters in map. So how can we do that? Let's say we are creating a function for subtract, right? So it's a comma b, and we return b minus a. So we have two parameters here, right? So how can we pass the parameters as list? This is also pretty simple. So let's say we have list A equals to this thing, and list B equals to this thing. All right, and then we can just say div list equals to map first our function, that is subtract, and then we pass the first list, and then we pass the second list. That is it, guys. We just pass both the lists as parameters. So this becomes A, this becomes B, this becomes A, this becomes B when they are being applied to our subtract function. If we print this, differences are invalid syntax. What is invalid here? Okay, there's no C here. So okay, so we forgot to convert this or cast this into a list. As you can see here, this actually is not a list. This is a map object. We need to convert this into a list. And now we have our differences. Difference between 54 and 11 is 54 and 65 is 11. Between these is 311. Between these, as you can see, 6 minus 56 is minus 50. So this is how you can pass multiple parameters to a function when using map. All right. So now, where are use cases of these things? Where is it's commonly used? So we just go type some use cases. So first of all, a very common use case that you will find very helpful is this is being used in casting. Like I just converted one thing here. We converted this uh, object to list, right? So let's say we have a whole array of strings and you want to convert that string to int. So that is where it's very commonly used. So converting to int, float, and all other things. So this is a very common use because to an array, if you have an array of strings, like let's say if this was initially the data was in string format, now you cannot subtract. You can just use it as a string and you cannot do numeric operations on it. You'll have to individually create a loop and convert all these into an integer. So instead of that, you can just do map and you can just write int here. So this int will be applied to all the items in this list. So that is a very common use case. Also, they are used in removing spaces or punctuations or more. So basically cleaning the data. So because map function takes all the inputs, so we can individually access the input and clean the data as required. And it is also used for finding absolute value, as we have here. We have minus 15, minus 38, but we just want to find the difference. We don't want negatives or positive. We can again convert all these to just absolute values using map function very easily. So these are the common use cases of map function.